Welcome to Table for 92. Element number 16, sulfur. It's number 16 because it has exactly 16 protons within its nucleus. For sulfur, we're cooking up all kinds of onions. Before making the blooming onion, first you want to make the dipping sauce. And to do that, we're going to make our own mayonnaise by mixing 1 egg yolk with 1 cup of olive oil. To that, we're going to add ketchup, horseradish, some paprika, salt, and a pinch each of black pepper, cayenne, and onion powder. And a few drops of Tabasco sauce. That's just for me, though. Sulfur is one of a handful of elements that would have been known to people thousands of years ago. But they didn't have the understanding of individual elements back then in antiquity. They were still working under the idea that there were 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water, that made up everything. That all thankfully changed in the 17th and 18th centuries. But it wasn't really until 1777 that Antoine Lavoisier convinced other scientists sulfur truly was an element. And it's the 9th most abundant element in the entire universe, but only makes up 0.03% of Earth's crust. And sulfur is a non-metal. Usually sulfur is mined out of volcanic vents where it is released in a gaseous form and leaves a yellow stain over the rocks with a telltale rotten eggs kind of smell. But that sulfur is not pure. It is mixed with other elements. When sulfur-rich volcanic rocks aren't available, you can always get sulfur out of fool's gold or iron pyrite. Because of sulfur's affiliation with volcanoes, it has long been associated with the underworld. Back in the day, folks would call sulfur brimstone. Brimstone was the Old English word for sulfur. So you know when they say hell is made up of fire and brimstone, well, it means it's really hot and really stinky. So with all the awful smells of sulfur and its association to volcanoes and the underworld, it's another great example of how naturally occurring phenomena so often contribute to mythical stories back in ancient times. As I mentioned before, sulfur has always been associated with fire because of the volcanic nature of it. And pyrite comes from the Greek word for pyro. Think, pyromaniac. The chemical formula for fool's gold is Fe(S)2, and it is the sulfur that gives the fake golden color. But ancient people didn't know it was yellow because there was sulfur in pyrite. They called it pyrite's lithos, or firestone, because it is a good mineral to be used as a fire starter. Kind of a cool coincidence. That yellow stuff is sulfur and has been mined out for thousands of years. And it's used as all sorts of fertilizers, dyes, pigments, etc. If you've ever been in a hot spring and you get a whiff of something awful, that's sulfur. Or someone just farted next to you. It's a very relaxing environment. So to make the bloomin' onion, you have to slice off the top, peel the skin off, and leaving the root, slice about a ½ inch under the root, and repeat until you have 16 slices around the onion. Release the sulfur. Then place the onion in ice water for about an hour. This will help it bloom a little bit more and get rid of some of the sulfur compounds so you get a sweeter flavor. Onions are thought to have been first cultivated in Central Asia 5,000 years ago, and people seem to love onions because they quickly spread all over the old world. Today, they're the 3rd most cultivated vegetable in the world. And after calcium and phosphorus, sulfur is the most abundant mineral element found in our bodies. So after an hour, we take the onion out of the water and make sure to let it dry, or else the batter won't have a good stick to it. And now we make the wet and dry batters. I like a mix of cornstarch and flour for my bloomin' onions. Add all the spices you want. For me, I'm going with salt, pepper, paprika, cumin, a little cayenne, and you just combine all that real well. The wet batter is just 2 beaten eggs and 1 cup of whole milk. So first you sprinkle some cornstarch over the onion bloom. This will help the batter set to the onion. Dredge it in the dry batter, then the wet, then back to the dry. Heat your oil to 350 degrees and drop your battered onion for about 6 minutes or golden brown. So yeah, if you were to rub an onion or garlic on your skin for just a little while, it would become irritated. Onions and garlic by themselves won't make you cry or irritate your skin, but once the flesh is punctured, the sulfur compounds are released. So you can imagine how terrible sulfur would be if it was concentrated and released in a gas form. Well, in World War I, the German army first started using poison gas, starting in 1915 with chlorine gas, but in 1917 they released the king of all the battle gases, sulfur mustard gas. And that had a strong garlic-like smell and irritated the eyes, skin, and lungs, and caused excruciating death for many. It's just another example of humans using the periodic table of elements for evil. But sometimes good can come out of evil. With the memory of how awful poison gas was in World War I, during World War II, poison gas was really never used intentionally. However, in Italy, the US Army secretly shipped 2,000 mustard gas bombs into the port city of Bari in southeastern Italy, just in case poison gas was going to be used by the Nazis fighting in northern Italy. On the night of December 2nd, 1943, the Luftwaffe attacked the port from the air and destroyed the SS John Harvey, carrying the mustard gas cargo, which was then released, and a cloud of sulfur mustard gas covered the city of Bari, and it resulted in great loss of life. It was a real tragedy. And of course, the US covered up that there had been an accidental mustard gas release, but a doctor named Stuart Francis Alexander was flown in to help, and he quickly realized that mustard gas had been released and was killing people. Remember, this was all top secret, so he figured it out by himself. But over the next 2 years, Alexander studied the effects the mustard gas had on the Bari victims and noticed the gas had killed off their white blood cells, and thought maybe mustard gas could be used to treat different forms of cancer. Over the next few years then, his experiments added to ongoing research about cancer treatment, and this helped to pioneer the field of chemotherapy. Thankfully, Dr. Alexander made it so that some good did come out of a terrible event. It truly is amazing how our knowledge of chemistry can be used for such awfulness. And such greatness. Thanks for watching. See you next time. I think these are great educational videos, and I'm extremely entertaining, so, smash that subscribe button.